this morning. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning for NIMAC for Publishers and Vendors, Basics and File Submission. I'm Nicole Gaines, the NIMAC Project Director, and I am joined this morning by Liz Schaller, who's the NIMAC Manager, and Alexa Miller, who's the NIMAC Librarian, will also be monitoring the chat for us if there are any questions. As Liz mentioned a moment ago, we will be stopping periodically to see if there are questions. But if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to just add those to the chat. So basically what we're going to be covering this morning is we're going to start off with a PowerPoint that discusses NIMAC basics, give an overview of publisher accounts, cover file validation and submission, and finally the NIMAC file certification process. Time permitting, we are also hoping to have a brief live demo to just kind of cover some of the basics, orient you to the publisher account. And I do want to let folks know that this presentation will be archived and available on our website, and the PowerPoint will also be available for download, so you will have that available if you are interested in downloading that later or using it as a reference. So the first thing I want to say before we actually launch into the content is to mark your calendar, because this is the first webinar of a three-part series, and we invite you to join us for the second and third part as well. The next session will be focused on NIMAS file creation, resources, and best practices. That will be offered twice. Tuesday, July 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern and Wednesday, July 9th at 9 a.m. Eastern. And then the third is new this year. We are offering a new session that is really targeted particularly for folks in publishing companies who are customer facing. This is going to be to give folks a little bit of information about how the NIMAC fits in to other organizations and other resources that produce and distribute accessible materials, and providing some assistance in terms of how to direct your customers when they are looking for accessible formats. That session will be held Tuesday, July 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. So at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Liz to cover the NIMAC, the basics, and take it away, Liz.
All right, thanks, Nicole. So we'll try to get through this pretty quickly. Like I said, I'll pause a couple times for questions, but if something comes up in the meantime, feel free to put it in the chat. All right. So the NIMAC project was created by IDEA 2004, and we serve as the National Source File Repository for K through 12 textbooks and core instructional materials. We make NIMAS files, which we'll talk about here in a minute, available to states for use in producing accessible formats like Braille for qualifying students. One really important thing, and we'll emphasize this throughout, is that the files in the NIMAC are not distributed directly to students. They do require accessible media producers to create an accessible format from them as a source file before that material can be provided directly to the student. The NIMAC has been in continuous operation since we opened in December of 2006, and states and districts have been able to require NIMAS in their instructional materials contracts with publishers since July of 2006. To date, we've received over 83,000 file sets. We're approaching 84,000 now from over 200 publishers, and over 57,000 files have been downloaded for use in producing accessible formats for students with disabilities. IDEA does not require that states work with the NIMAC, but we're very pleased to say that all 50 states, as well as the 6 eligible territories and the Department of Defense, have chosen to do so. States and districts that coordinate with the NIMAC are legally obligated to do 2 things. They're obligated to require NIMAS from publishers in their textbook adoption contracts, And they're required to abide by the eligibility requirements of IDEA as well as copyright law in the use of NIMAS files. States are also required to designate and manage a small number of authorized users for their state. Each state education agency, or SEA, that's an acronym you might hear a few times throughout, that coordinates names a NIMAC state coordinator. And this individual's primary responsibility, aside from coordinating with the NIMAC on behalf of their state, is to designate and manage the state's authorized users. These individuals receive login credentials and they have full access to the repository to either download files or to assign files to registered accessible media producers who work on behalf of a state. Typically, states have between 4 and 6 authorized users at various agencies, either, at the SEA, they may have them at an instructional resource center, maybe at a school for the blind, or some other state agency that works as part of the system in that state to produce accessible formats. IDEA 2004 defines the eligibility requirements for receiving materials that are produced from NIMAS files. In order to qualify for NIMAS-sourced accessible formats, students must be in elementary or secondary education, and they must have both a qualifying disability per the eligibility guidelines of the National Library Service, as well as an individualized education program, or an IEP. They must have both of those things to be eligible for NIMAS sourced materials. And I do want to note that the NIMAC is not involved in determining eligibility for individual students. That is the responsibility of the state, of the primarily those authorized users who are verifying that when they assign files for accessible format production. All right, now let's get into the NIMAS specification. NIMAS stands for the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard. It is an XML-based source file format that is based on the DAISY standard. And it's designed for use in producing formats such as Braille, DAISY, EPUB, and large print. Basically, any accessible format, either print or digital, that a student may need in the classroom, you can produce that from NIMAS. And again, NIMAS is not intended for distribution directly to students. And NIMAS is the only format that the NIMAC can receive. We do receive that question from time to time, especially from new publishers, but NIMAS is the only format that we can accept into the repository. Now, you may be wondering what could be within scope for NIMAS and that could be submitted to the NIMAC. There is a definition under IDEA. Under IDEA, the materials within scope for the NIMAC include printed textbooks and related printed core materials that are written and published primarily for use in elementary school and secondary school instruction and required by an SEA or a local education agency, LEA, for use by students in the classroom. Neither the U.S. Department of Education nor the NIMAC imposes a definition of core that would be determined instead by the state or district that is purchasing materials. So we do accept a range of student-facing materials that include textbooks, workbooks, supplementary readers, as well as ancillary materials like Blackline Masters. There are also materials that are primarily not within scope for NIMAS, and that would include trade books. The exception to that being when trade books are packaged as part of an educational curriculum by an educational publisher. Other than that, we don't receive trade book files like, Grapes of Wrath or The Great Gatsby. We also don't receive college textbooks or reference books. We don't receive materials published before 2006. We do occasionally still get requests for these, but we do not receive materials that were published before the NIMAC was established. And then we don't receive teachers' editions of textbooks and ancillaries that are for the exclusive use of the teacher. There are teachers' editions of materials in the NIMAC, but we can only accept the student-facing pages in those materials. So sometimes there might be some sort of teacher ancillary that includes a lot of worksheets. We can receive the worksheet pages that would be copied and distributed to the students, but not the teacher portion of those materials. And just one other note on what the NIMAC can accept. In May of 2020, the department published a notice of interpretation that clarified that IDEA does permit the NIMAC to accept NIMAS files for digital instructional materials when those materials can be supplied in valid NIMAS format. And that is a very important caveat. It is a small subset of digital instructional materials that would be appropriate to submit to the NIMAC. And those are materials that are, composed primarily of static text and images. They have a linear reading order. They have, minimal or no interactivity and little or no audiovisual content. So if you're thinking about digital materials, that is a small subset that fits that criteria. Digital products that are highly interactive, like games or software, cannot be converted into the NIMAS format. There is also an exemption for WCAG compliant digital materials. The Notice of Interpretation cited WCAG 2.0 AA as the accessibility criteria that would make digital instructional materials exempt from being submitted to the NIMAC. And if you have any questions about this or want more information, we do have a frequently asked questions page about this, and you're also more than welcome to reach out with any questions at all. I did want to note that occasionally we do send you, as publishers, requests for NIMAS files. While states and districts that coordinate with the NIMAC are legally obligated to require NIMAS in their instructional materials contracts, we know that, especially when purchasing is happening at the district level, that does not always happen. So occasionally, one of our authorized users will have be made aware that there's a need for an accessible format for material that's not in our system already. And they will send us a request to see if we can reach out to the publisher and obtain a NIMAS file for that because there is an immediate need for Braille or another accessible format for an eligible student. In those cases, if the material that our user needs is within scope for the NIMAC, we will reach out to the publisher and just ask if you'd be willing to provide a file. And we are so appreciative of our publisher's assistance in those situations where that need for the accessible format has been identified, but we don't have that file yet. And a quick side note here, if you happen to be fielding requests from teachers or schools who are trying to locate accessible formats of your material, again, the NIMAC, we have NIMAS files, and NIMAS files are only used in the first production of an accessible format, and of course, they're not distributed directly to a student. But once that accessible format is produced, it can be reproduced and can serve additional qualifying students. So if you're helping your customers locate accessible formats for your material, the best place for them to go or for you to go to help them is the LUI database of accessible materials. This is a repository where accessible media producers across the country submit the Braille and large print that they've produced. And teachers can go in and search and see if the Braille that they need has already been produced, which is a huge help in time savings because Braille is a time and resource intensive format to produce. So if you would, like to have more information for your maybe your customer service team at your publisher who is fielding these requests, like Nicole mentioned earlier, we are going to have a part 3 of our webinar series this year on July 22nd, and we'll share that link again for registration. And that session is specifically going to be focused on how to help your customers locate accessible formats when they reach out to you about that. And with that, I'm going to pause. That was a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? All right. Okay. No questions. Like I said, please put them in the chat. Nicole and Alexa and I are all keeping an eye on the chat as well as we go along. So let's talk a little bit about publisher accounts. NIMAC publisher accounts allow you to manually upload new inventory to the NIMAC system, to replace inventory when you maybe have a new printing or you're wanting to add image descriptions or something else to your file. They also allow you to search, view, and download your inventory as well as to export inventory reports. And Nicole is going to show you some of that system functionality during the demo portion today. These accounts also allow you to create additional user accounts for either others at your company or for your conversion vendors. Within the publisher account, you can download the NIMAC validation wizard, as well as the Excel to OPF metadata template, which are both very useful tools when you're producing NIMAS files. They can help you to generate correctly formatted OPF metadata using the Excel to OPF tool. And they allow you to export reports of user downloads for your materials. So if you're interested in how your materials are being utilized, you can always download those reports. And again, Nicole will show you that part during the demo portion. All right, let's get into when you're submitting NIMAS files, what that validation process looks like. So as I mentioned, there is a validation wizard for NIMAS files, and the NIMAC released an updated version of this wizard in fall 2024. As in the past, we do ask that publishers and vendors validate all files before submitting or uploading to the NIMAC because files that fail automated validation will be rejected for upload by the system, or in the batch delivery file processing, they will fail to upload. The NIMAS validation ensures that the XML is well formatted, that the referenced images are present in the file set, and that the file validates to the NIMAS as well as the MathML DTD if MathML is present. The tool also provides feedback related to missing or invalid OPF metadata, and it can also detect some XML tagging errors and provide some best practices feedback for some issues. One thing to note is that the updated wizard, as well as the NIMAC portal will now alert you if a file contains MathML, but certain math symbols are detected outside of the MathML tagging. This will show up as a warning in your validation feedback. And this is the primary update to the validation wizard that was incorporated back in the fall. We did this because we were getting reports, especially from some of our Braille producers, that files that were tagged with MathML didn't have all of the math expressions tagged as MathML. And this just, it slows down the Braille production process and the MathML tagging, if it's already in the file, making sure that all of the expressions are tagged as MathML just really helps with any accessible format production, whether it's print or digital. The validation wizard is available in both Windows and Mac versions. And once you've installed the tool on your machine, you just navigate to the location of the zipped file for the complete NIMAS file set, and then you click the validate button. And when the validation is complete, the results will display on the screen. The results can also be exported as a CSV file if that's desired. And the next few slides will show you some screenshots of that. So this is a screenshot of the wizard. There's a browse button where you go, and then you'll navigate to your zipped file as we explained, and then you'll hit that validate button. And this is what the wizard looks like while it's in the process of validating. You'll have that little green bar at the top that'll kind of ping back and forth as it's processing your file. And then this is a screenshot of what it looks like when you have a successful validation output. That green bar at the top says successfully validated the NIMAC package. There are no errors, and there are no warnings or best practices. Errors are the only thing that will prevent you from uploading the file to the system, but we do provide those warnings and best practices feedback in this wizard as well so that you can correct those issues if you choose to. So again, errors are the things that must be corrected. Warnings are corrections that we recommend, but they're not required for upload. And we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but the NIMAC staff also perform a manual review of files, and at that point we may spot some of those items and flag them for you to correct. And then best practices, those are information that we want you to consider when you're preparing your NIMAC files, but again, they're not required to be corrected for a successful upload. Here's a screenshot of the wizard that shows you what a validation output looks like when you do have those errors, warnings, and best practices. The screen will automatically sort. So your errors will be sorted to the top, and you'll be able to see the event type describes the error, and then you have a rule that shows what the error is, and then we also have a further description if that's applicable, as well as the location that you can find that error or warning or best practice in the file. Warnings will show up second, and then best practices will show up third in your list. And at the bottom right, you see that export button. That's where you can export to a CSV file if you want to take a look at your results outside of this screen, just in Excel. I did want to note that occasionally files will fail upload or batch processing due to the zip files being corrupt. So after zipping your NIMAC file sets, it is a good idea to check to ensure that the files were not corrupted during the compression process. You can just click on the zip file, and then if it opens the file, it's probably okay and not corrupt. That's not something that comes up a whole lot, but it does come up occasionally. So we do recommend just double checking before you upload your NIMAC files to the system. And with that, I'll pause again to see if there are any questions.
Hi, Liz. This is online tool or offline tool?
Do you have
The
a question?
validation tool. The
The validation.
validation tool.
Uh-huh.
This is offline tool or online? The file should be validated in online or offline.
Oh, so both. I mean, the validation happens when you upload files in the system too, but the validation wizard can be used offline. You download it to your machine.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Got it.
You're welcome. All right. With that, I think I'll hand it over to Nicole.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for that question. When we get to the demo part, I will actually show you where in the system you can download the validation wizard if you're not sure where that is. So moving along, we're going to talk now about submitting files to the repository. There are basically two ways to do that. There's the manual file delivery process and there's batch delivery. And so we're going to start off with the manual upload process. So basically, the way that the manual file delivery works is that you can log into your account and individually add files to your inventory. We kind of go back and forth between saying 250 megabytes, 300 megabytes. Basically, if a file is between 250 and 300, it's going to slow down a little bit in terms of how long it takes it to upload. So we generally say, 300 is possible, 250 is probably, in a practical sense, what your upper limit is going to be. When you log into your account, your inventory is always going to be your landing page. And from there, you can either add inventory. There's a link to add inventory. That's the button for uploading a file that's never been submitted before. In other words, you're not resubmitting the file. It's an ISBN that is not already in the system. You also have the opportunity from that screen to search for a specific file or scroll down. If you have a very small inventory, you may just be able to scroll down, find your file, and click replace a zip file. In terms of where those are, the next slide is going to show you a screen capture that shows you exactly where on your landing page you can find these different options. Add new content is going to be up at the top where your menu bar is. And then the replace zip file option is going to be over to the right for each individual record that is in the system. So in terms of the process, when you upload a file, the file will first undergo automated validation. And as Liz mentioned, if that file fails validation, it will not be accepted by the system for upload, but the system will display your validation errors. However, if the file passes, the system will automatically extract the metadata from the OPF from your file and create a system record and open that record up for you in edit mode. This can be super convenient if you want to just review that metadata, take a look if there's anything you've forgotten or that you want to tweak before you save the file. You can actually make changes, and any saved changes will be saved not only to the system record, but to your OPF. So it's a permanent change to the file. When the file is saved, it will immediately appear in your uncertified inventory. This is kind of one of the possible minor advantages to doing the manual upload is that it is immediate, and that will trigger the NIMAC to review the file. You don't need to provide any additional notification. So again, when it comes to NIMAC, to the manual upload versus batch delivery, 250 to 300 megabytes, that's pretty much going to be your limit. There is no minimum or maximum file size, however, for submitting files by FTP. That's the batch delivery process. So it's really up to you. If you have smaller files and you would really rather submit them by FTP, that is completely fine. There's also no minimum or maximum number of files that can be delivered at one time. You're welcome to, if you have 100 files, you can deliver them by FTP. If you have one file, you can deliver by FTP. It's really whatever works best for you. Next, I'm going to talk about the batch delivery or FTP process. This is basically going to be required for any file that is over 300 megabytes. It's going to be delivered by SFTP directly to our system vendor, which is Overdrive. The host location for that is transfer.overdrive.com. And in order to access it, you are going to have an FTP login for that specific publisher account. This can always be requested if you don't have one already by emailing NIMAC-support@overdrive.com. When you make that request, what you will want to do is be sure to include your NIMAC login ID for that publisher's account. That's going to indicate to Overdrive which publisher account that FTP that FTP account is for. So basically, if you are a publisher, you are going to need to create a NIMAC sub-user account for each conversion vendor that's going to be working on your behalf, and I will go through that during the demo part and show you exactly where that is. And if you are a vendor, you are going to have a separate NIMAC account and separate FTP login for each publisher for whom you wish to batch upload files. So one thing that's super important when you are delivering files by FTP is that they need to be in the root directory of the FTP only. You may be tempted, if you are a very organized and orderly person, to create neat little folders and put the zip files in folders and then drag those folders over. Please resist that temptation. The automated process that goes and retrieves those files overnight cannot look inside folders. So just don't use folders. Just transfer only the zip files themselves. And if you have any questions about that or need assistance, please let us know. The other thing that, before we talk about the batch delivery report, I want to just kind of emphasize is that it's really important to just realize that when you are doing that batch delivery, you are bypassing the NIMAC. You are working directly, you're delivering directly to a server to which the NIMAC staff actually don't have access. We're located in Louisville, and Overdrive is located in Cleveland. And when you send that FTP, you are interacting directly with that server and that automated process. And so just want to emphasize, and I'll talk about it more when we get into the daily batch delivery report, but it's not a process that we directly monitor. And so you just want to kind of keep that in mind. So since we don't monitor it and we're not going to be interacting directly with you about, hey, this file was successfully uploaded, this file was not successfully uploaded, how are you going to know? Because you will receive an automated, daily report for any file that was processed that was delivered for the FTP. And so the way that this works is that FTP deliveries are processed overnight. This is US Eastern Time. And the next morning, any files that were processed, that will generate an automated report that goes back to the email address associated with the FTP login. So, for example, again, if you are a vendor who has uploaded or transferred files by FTP for multiple publishers, you're going to get a separate report for each of those publishers. One of the things that's really important in terms of these automated emails is that spam filters have gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. If you are delivering files by FTP but are not seeing these automated emails, please be sure to check your spam or your junk folder. You probably will need to whitelist no reply -NIMAC@overdrive.com, or you may just whitelist overdrive.com in order to successfully receive the emails if you are encountering an issue. So the most important thing about the FTP report is that you want to be sure to review all the reports that you receive. That report, again, is going to be your only notification if an FTP delivery fails. So again, the whole email piece is really central. If you are a vendor and you're a point person for managing the FTP, they leave the company, or if their email address changes, it's really important to let Overdrive know about that so they can either update the email address or create a new login for the person who has taken that person's place. So again, any questions about that, let us know. But just really important to kind of keep that information current. So next we're going to talk a little bit about reading the report. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because what you're going to see with this report is it looks really similar to the output of the validation wizard, because if there are any issues or any problems, these are going to look, they're going to look like they're going to be the same issues that you would encounter had you run the files through the validation wizard before upload. And so, as Liz mentioned before, it's really important to run every file through the validation wizard before upload, because any issues that are encountered with that, they will prevent you from having that file successfully upload. So basically, if your report shows no failed uploads, you don't need to take any action. On this screen, we actually see a screen capture of an actual report. And basically, when you get that email, when you get that report in the morning, all you really need to do first is zero in on the upper left. You're going to see a summary of the processing. If you only see successfully processed up there, then you are good. One thing, just as a side note, is that the report will indicate whether the uploads were new titles or resubmission titles. That's just kind of a little extra information that it provides. The other thing that you will see in the table below is there is a result column, and so that also shows for all of these success. In the next slide, we're going to see a different scenario. We're going to see that up in the upper left, we see failed to process new title 1. And so it will tell you that it failed, and it will tell you the number as well. So in the table below on this one, we see the result failure. And again, what you're going to see in that details column is basically the same information that the validation wizard would provide. It's unusual and it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally there will be a situation where the file hangs up, there's some kind of really odd issue, unusual issue, and the details column may not provide a lot of information. In those cases, just contact us. We will work with Overdrive to identify what the source of the issue was. Generally speaking, we strive to have that details uh, really identify all of the information you need to locate what the problem is, where it is in the file, but we're always happy to help if you have any question related to what that output means. If you have a failed upload, again, that details column will hopefully provide all the information that you need. And again, that daily report is your official notification regarding failed uploads. We will not be contacting you separately. Overdrive will not contact you separately. That is really the way that you're going to know. So just be sure and take a look at it. Now, the other possibility there is, you can always log into your account and look and see like, hey, is the file I uploaded, is it there? If it's not there, I guess there was a problem. But that's not really the best way to do it. It's better to keep up with those reports. So the next thing I just want to mention is that once you've corrected a file, you don't need to provide any notification to Overdrive or NIMAC. You can just redeliver the file by FTP, and then that new delivery will show up on the next report. And so at that point, you will be able to verify that it uploaded successfully. Again, if you're running files through the validation wizard before upload, you should never have to worry about this. All of your FTP deliveries should be successful. And then the final thing that I want to cover before I hand it back off to Liz to talk about file review and certification is if you have certified inventory that you want to resubmit, please just get in touch with us and let us know. There is in the system a kind of a prevention mechanism to avoid any accidental changes to a file that's already been accepted into the NIMAC, that's already been certified. And so you cannot go in and overwrite or edit, the metadata for a file that has already been accepted into the system. However, we're happy to move those files into stalled for you. If you need to intentionally resubmit, you may make some kind of change. You may want to resubmit because you've got an updated printing with corrections and you want to have that version in the NIMAC. We're happy to help with that. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Liz to talk a little bit more about the certification process. Take it away, Liz.
Thanks, Nicole. Did anyone have any questions before we move along? We've got one more section and then Nicole will go through that demo and show some of what we've talked about today. All right. Well, we'll go into the file review process and certification process. So once you successfully upload your files to the repository, whether that be a new file or a resubmission of a file, those newly uploaded files will appear in uncertified inventory, and they are automatically placed into our file review queue. Generally, we review files in the order that they're received, but we are happy to expedite files when there's an immediate need. So if you have a deadline for certification, please have the publisher let us know at the point of file submission, or even in advance if possible. Say, you are submitting a new reading program, you have 200 files, you're going to be submitting them over the next several weeks, and they have X deadline. Just let us know when you start submitting them so that we know to prioritize them for review. To be accepted into the NIMAC, files must pass that automated validation upon upload, as well as a manual review by NIMAC staff. When files are certified, they will move into your certified inventory, and the super user, the account holder at the publisher, will receive an automated email with the digital certificate number. You can also add additional email addresses that will receive those certificate numbers. So if you have additional staff at your publisher that you would like to receive those, just let us know. We can add those email addresses for you. These numbers can also be found in the individual system records or an inventory report that you can export from your account. So for some customers that you work with, they may ask for that number as part of the process for verifying that you have submitted your files to the NIMAC according to the contract that you have with them. So there are several ways that you can find these numbers to be able to send to them, not just your email that you'll get as soon as the file's certified, but also anytime you want to export that inventory report or just check that individual system record. Now, when our team are conducting the manual review of your files, we will review the metadata that is submitted with a file set to ensure that it is correct and complete, as well as we'll perform some additional checks to the XML to ensure that required tags like page numbers are present, and that common content like tables of contents and glossaries are tagged correctly. If your file includes alt text, we'll also do a spot check for quality of alt text. And then I do want to note that the NIMAC, of course, does not receive the print books. And so we're not doing a page by page, side by side comparison to evaluate the tagging in the XML. We're checking kind of those primary sections, making sure that lists are nested correctly, that they don't include extraneous paragraph tags that might, cause an accessible format conversion process to goof. We'll check your image file quality to make sure that the images are high enough resolution for large print production. So just there are several layers to our manual check. We can make minor metadata changes in the system at the point of file review, similarly to how Nicole was describing that when you upload a file, you can make edits in the system that will be saved to the OPF. We can also do that as we're reviewing the files, and we do that routinely. Maybe add a series, or correct the pagination if that's included, or something along those lines. However, most XML and other file issues will require vendor correction and resubmission of the file. When files require correction, the NIMAC staff will send detailed feedback and to the individual that uploaded the file, and then we will place that file or those files back in the stalled inventory while we await the corrected file to be re-uploaded. The timeline for file review varies throughout the year. It depends, of course, on the number of files that we receive, as well as if there are requests for expedited review of files that are in the queue. When our submission levels are relatively light, I would say kind of at the tail end of spring, beginning of summer, we had a fairly light file submission period. Then the files that you submit might be certified the day or the next day that they're uploaded. However, if you're delivering a lot of files at one time, or we have many other files in the queue already, it may take 2 weeks or longer. We're finding that especially in late winter, early spring, we are especially busy, and at that time it could take 2 or even up to 3 weeks, depending on how many files we have in the queue. I think we were up to almost 1,000 in the queue at one point in January or February this year. So there definitely are periods of time where it takes a little bit longer. And again, I just want to hit on the fact that if you do have a certification deadline, that's not something that we would be aware of. We are not looped on the contracts that you have with your customers, so you will need to notify us via email so that we know to expedite your files for review. You know, it would be totally unmanageable for the NIMAC to receive all of the procurement contracts for all the states and districts, and it's not something that we are routinely looped on at all. So again, please just let us know if that deadline is in place so that we can make sure that we're prioritizing your files for review. We do encourage you to submit files at least 2 weeks in advance of a deadline. We know that that's not always possible, but that really provides that little wiggle room. It allows time if there are any issues with your file for the vendor to make the needed corrections and resubmit. And again, files are usually certified in the order that we receive them, but we are happy to prioritize files to meet deadlines. This is the NIMAC homepage. It's actually going to look a little bit different here in a week or two. We've been working with a vendor on a website refresh. It won't look completely different, but the menu is going to change a little bit. The organization is going to change a little bit, but it'll still have that same great content there, the resources that you need for both how to work in the system, as well as how to produce NIMAS files, including the archived version of this training that we're doing today. You'll be able to access that on the website. And I'll just pause quickly for questions before I hand it over to Nicole, who is going to go through our demo. All right, I'll stop sharing my screen, Nicole, so you can share yours.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of time now to kind of walk you through the publisher portal. Right now, you should be seeing the public search screen with the login link at the upper right. Just as a little bit of a side note, one of the things that you can do if you just want to do a really quick check to see if one of your files is already certified, you can always do the public search of the NIMAC without logging in. That's what you see on this screen here, and that's also available from our the homepage of our informational website. The only materials that you will see in the public search are the certified files. And so that's kind of a quick search, a quick shortcut there. If you actually log into the system and search, you will only be searching your own inventory. So just a kind of a quick heads up about that. So I'm going to go ahead and log into our test account here. And just to kind of give you a little bit of an orientation to your landing page will always be your inventory. And basically the organization of the page is over to the upper right, we have a couple of menu bars, and over to the left, we have a number of filters. These can be applied either after you do a search of your inventory using the search box in the upper right, or they can be applied before you do a search, before or after you do a search. If you have a small amount of inventory, you can actually scroll through. You can choose to view up to 100 records on the one screen, or again, you can do a search by title, creator, ISBN, or identifier. Generally, your ISBN or identifier search, that's going to be your, hands down, that's going to be your best search to ensure that you have identified the exact record or the exact file that you need. And so basically, from here again, you can access all of the functionality of the system. I do want to point out for the person who asked about the validation wizard, if you go to the resources tab in the upper right, that is where you can download the NIMAC validation wizard. And so that is a tool that is used offline. There is a Windows version, there is a Mac version. I will say one caveat for the Mac version is that it is not quite as up to date as the Windows version. We're waiting on Overdrive to get some fixes into the Mac to bring it exactly up to speed with the Windows version. So we do recommend the Windows version at this point. Another thing I want to note in terms of navigating is that you can always go back to your landing page. If you click the NIMAC logo in the upper left, that will always take you back to your inventory. So that's kind of a little bit of a whirlwind tour here. Also wanted to point out that as we mentioned in terms of the manual upload process, that add new content, that link is up there in your menu bar. And then if we kind of are scrolling down, if we're looking at the actual records for the files, we will see that there is the replace zip file option here for any files that are not in certified status. So again, when we think about these filters, most of these have to do with metadata, different types of metadata, copyright year, state edition. But one that I want to particularly point out is that you can actually zero in on the specific status of the files. So, for example, since this is a test account, we don't actually have certified inventory in there, but we show some files installed and uncertified status. And so this is kind of a good way to kind of zero in if you are interested in the status of particular files. Specifically, if you are wondering, if you are wanting to know which files are awaiting corrections, that stalled inventory that we were talking about earlier, that's where those are going to be. So one of the things that's important is if you have a file that's installed inventory and you're not sure why, please follow up because again, our workflow is that those files are moved to stalled after the feedback has been sent to the vendor. So if you're not sure, we can clarify, maybe an email, if an email got missed or something, got sent to your junk or whatever. Hopefully your emails from the NIMAC aren't going to junk. But anyway, we're always happy to help with that. So the other thing that I want to note is that as we're going through this, I welcome this to be more interactive. If you have specific questions or if there's anything you'd like to see in more detail, please just put that in the chat and let me know. Happy to spend more time on anything that's of particular interest. So the next thing that I want to talk about is that manual upload process. It's a very simple interface. When you go to add new content, you simply click choose file. You're going to navigate to the file that you want and click open. Very simple. And then click upload. Again, if the file is larger in size, it's going to take a little longer for that validation process to happen. If it's a small file, as this one is, then you can, it's going to happen really quickly. As we saw, this metadata page opened really quickly. You will see the complete metadata. And again, you can make any edits or changes to this. And we'll actually make a change to the title there. And again, when you save it, aha. This is actually a good example here of something else that is good to mention. And that is that if you have a publisher imprint, another check that is in place in the NIMAC that is designed to ensure that vendors do not inadvertently upload a file to the wrong publisher account is that each publisher imprint is associated with the publisher's account. In this case, my test file, the imprint was not associated with my test account. And so I'm going to change it to an imprint that does for the purposes of demonstrating this. But if you as a vendor are uploading a file and you see that that creates an error, please contact the NIMAC and we will add any new imprint to the account that you need us to add. That isn't something that a vendor or publisher can directly do, but we can do it. It's very quick, it's very easy, and we're happy to help with that. So once you've made any changes that you want to make, and you save that file, again, it will immediately appear, and we're actually going to go now back to our landing page, status, uncertified, and we're going to choose sort by update date most recent, and that will bring it to the very top, and there it is. Another thing that I do want to mention is that if you have a file that is installed inventory and it is resubmitted, it will automatically show back up in uncertified. And the same thing will happen if you edit, if there's an issue and or you make a change through the portal. It will automatically go back from stalled into the uncertified status. So the next thing that I want to talk about, anybody want to see anything else related to that editing or the uploading? If we go to the replace zip file, the interface is identical. It's the same. So we don't really need to look at that twice. But if there are any questions about that, please let me know. The next thing that I want to talk a little bit about is up at the very top, we see over to the right user information. This is where you're going to go if you want to create additional sub-users for your publisher account. You can also go here to the My Account to view your existing information. If you want to make any changes to this, just let us know. It is not editable. And this is also where you can see, as Liz mentioned, if you want additional email recipients for the certification emails, you can see if you have any set up. In this case, we do not, but this is where those folks would show up if they were present. Another thing that you can do here, you can change your password from this screen if you want to. Under the My Sub-Users, this again is where you're going to go to view any sub-users that you already have or to add a new one. So in this case, there are already 3 sub-users who have been created. And from this screen, there are actions over to the right that you can do for each individual. You could edit if there's a change to the person's name or email address. You could reset their password or you could delete the user, right? It's kind of a good idea if you have a vendor or a publisher contact who is no longer with your organization to just delete those accounts. When you go to add a user, it's very simple, very easy, very quick. All you need to do is add their first name, last name, their email address, and then you want to choose a user role. The important thing to remember here is that publishers will have full permissions for your account, whereas vendors will have all of the permissions they need to upload inventory, manage inventory for you, but without 2 really important pieces. The first is they cannot create additional users and they cannot download your inventory. We're going to talk a little bit more in the next session, the next webinar in the series, about not using downloaded files to resubmit because those are going to be fingerprinted and watermarked. But anyway, if you have a vendor account that you want to set up, the vendor role is going to be the most appropriate for those users. When you add that information and click Save Changes, the person will automatically be emailed 2 separate emails, one with a login and the other with their password. The last thing that I want to talk about with this demo is just the ability for you to create reports on the fly at any time using the export button that we see over here to the right, kind of in the middle of the screen. This is something that can be super handy if you want to do an export. You can export the metadata for your entire inventory, and that's going to include the inventory status and the digital certificate numbers for all of the certified inventory, or you can export after doing any type of search or filter on your inventory. So that can be really helpful. And then the last report that I want to note is that you can also, if you are a publisher user, not a vendor user, but a publisher user, if you are interested in a report of the downloads by NIMAC users, you can access that in the menu bar at the upper right. So, any questions? Oops. Any questions?
We do have one question. Well, it's just about someone was asking if one file in a batch upload fails and the rest are successful, then does everything need to be re-uploaded or just the file that failed? And that failed file you can upload again via FTP, or you can just upload it if it's small enough. You can just upload it in the system. It doesn't matter either way. Is totally fine. There was one
Right.
other question
And
that
just to be, I'm sorry, but just to be clear, if only one file fails in a delivery, that's the only file that needs to be resubmitted. You
exactly.
do not need to resubmit the entire delivery, only the file that failed.